And Dimas City Council meeting will come to order. Please rise. Please follow me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I know that I can't see what's going on TV, but I'm hearing that TV is much better tonight after the last month of some changes and revitalization. Holy cow. I hope the picture that we're seeing is the same picture that the residents of San Dimas are seeing with the new improvements. And I want to thank the staff and the folks who have been working on this computer system for us. For bringing it up. I know there's always going to be flaws, but I think we're in pretty doggone good shape, and thank you guys very much to the technicians who've been working on it. Okay.
Just one quick note on that, Mayor. The cable channel is still in standard def. In the next month, it will make the transition to HD, so that will be more improved than it is currently. So
what you're telling me is the people in television land are still seeing what they saw.
It's better, but it's not as good as it's going to be in the next month. So Spectrum still has a little transition period to activate the HD, and then they'll be at the high density or high.
Mr. Mayor, I'm looking at the YouTube right now. It looks a lot better than before, but it's going to get even better once they do the update.
Super. Thank you guys very much, and we'll go from there. Madam City Clerk, could you, there's no reason to call attendance. We're all five here. Before I go into any type of comments, the City Attorney, do you have any report that you need to make?
No, we don't have any report that's needed right now, Mayor.
Thank you. Oral communications. Members of the audience are invited to address the City Council on any item on this agenda or not on this agenda. Public comment will not be taken during each individual agenda item except for the public hearing items. Comments on public hearing items will be heard when that item is scheduled for discussion. Under the provisions of the Brown Act, the legislative body is prohibited from engaging in discussion on any item not appearing on the posted agenda. However, your concerns may be referred to as staff or set for discussion at a later date. Each speaker will be limited to speaking once for up to 3 minutes. Madam Clerk, do we have any speaker cards?
Raymond Foster is the first speaker.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council, City staff, and community members. Hi there. So, you know, I have a couple of quotes here. DoD families serve as a force multiplier, contributing to the readiness and retention of quality personnel. The goal is a combat-ready force supported by families whose quality of life reflects the high standards and pride of the nation they serve. That's from the DoD. The Marine Corps says that mission readiness depends on strong and resilient home front. And the Army says that soldier and family readiness is a force multiplier that connects soldiers with their families and a command team. And yet, in 2020, 24% of active duty service members reported some level of food insecurity. We also know from the USDA that 22,000 active duty military families, 213,000 National Guardsmen or reservists, and 1.2 million veterans also suffer from food insecurity. Now, there's a distinction between food insecurity and hunger. Hunger is, well, it's a physiological condition. I'm hungry. Food insecurity is the lack of access to a reliable source of food, and that could be because of income, because of where you live. There's all kinds of things. And as you know, the Satellite Rotary Club, or the Rotary Club of San Dimas, long ago, 2 years ago, adopted the food pantry. And yes, there are food pantries on nearly every major military base which service junior enlisted personnel, and have thus delivered 13 tons of food in the last 2 years to the Marine Corps base at 29 Palms. It's the nation's largest and most remote base on the continental United States. We're working with the California National Guard to expand this program that we're doing to encompass Guard units And also, we have a scheduled trip down to Camp Pendleton because they would like to get into this, and Irwin would like us to also to help them out. So our next food drive, which is very important because essentially San Dimas has become the collection point for a number of organizations. As an example, we have church groups like Stars and Stripes Club from Holy Name of Mary, the Latter-day Saints, the Lutheran Church in Laverne. All kinds of small churches now are working with us, the Knights of Columbus. About 8 different women's clubs, 9 or 10 different American Legions, a half a dozen VFW posts, and about 25 Masonic lodges contribute to the San Dimas food drive, which will take place. Now, we have a kickoff party, so we kind of kick off and celebrate, and that will be Thursday night, this Thursday night, here in town at 402 West Arrow Highway at the High Point Brewing Company. If you bring 5 cans of food, we will give you a free beer. And then the food drive itself is this Saturday at the Masonic Lodge from 9 to 3, 220 North Monte Vista Avenue. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Raymond.
Next speaker is Marilyn Sparks.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, and staff. My name is Marilyn Sparks, and I'm a San Dimas business owner and ambassador for the San Dimas Chamber of Commerce and the committee co-chair for the San Dimas Beer and Wine Walk. I would like to invite you and the community to the 7th annual San Dimas Beer and Wine Walk, taking place next Saturday, October 7th, 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. in downtown San Dimas, between San Dimas Avenue and Cataract. Each ticket can be purchased online or at participating downtown stores. Tickets include 20 tastings of food and 20 tastings of beer or wine, a souvenir swag bag, and a bottle of water. This year, our theme is Halloween, so wear your costumes, but keep masks at home. We're featuring 10 local breweries and 10 wine stops. Tasty delights, both sweet and savory, from local restaurants are also included. We have 3 bands and a DJ for your enjoyment, as well as many shopping opportunities for merchants and downtown stores. The annual Wine and Beer Walk is a fundraiser that assists the Chamber to continue its programming and work towards our organization's mission to foster and promote the growth of business and professional community while enhancing the quality of life in San Dimas. We incorporate a fun event while inviting the community to visit small businesses and nonprofits, experience local restaurants, and connect with local business owners that impact the local economy. As a result, we see an increase in foot traffic, awareness of these local businesses, and a positive perspective of what San Dimas has to offer. Tickets can be purchased online at the San Dimas Chamber office, San Dimas Ace Hardware, La Via Kitchen, and Villa Verde. For more information, please contact the San Dimas Chamber at 909-592-3818 or by email at info@sandimaschamber.com. Thank you.
Next speaker is Joanna Giovanni.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. My name is Joanna Giovannini, and I'm the mother to 2 daughters, 8 and 10, who play soccer in AYSO Region 112, Laverne, San Dimas. I am also the coach administrator for the region. As the person who put together the practice schedule for over 100 soccer teams, I'm here today to ask for your support from the city of San Dimas with additional field space for our program. Unfortunately, at this time, we are limited to only 1 field in the city of San Dimas. The vast majority of our practices and our games occur in the city of Laverne. However, if you look at the logo of our region, both Laverne and San Dimas are represented there. Our region currently serves over 1,100 soccer players from all over the area. One of the 6 philosophies of AYSO is open registration. So we enroll players regardless of their home address. For some players, they may be playing in our region because they have a family member who works here in San Dimas. or it could be that they have a grandparent or family member living here in San Dimas. We have found it difficult to secure practice and game fields in your city and would love the opportunity to talk about how we can open additional opportunities for our region to serve the residents and children of San Dimas. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker, Pete Lewis.
Mayor, Council, got a bunch of little issues. I wasn't going to come speak, but I was walking down the sidewalk this morning, and I talked to a resident who just has a brand-new sidewalk, and she's very happy with it, and apparently talked to the mayor, and he wasn't aware that he thought the city had paid for the sidewalk, and actually Sherry did a really good job and got Metro to pay for that sidewalk improvement. And it was something that's well used and really a step forward for people that walk there, including me. I sent you guys an email. I spoke at Claremont last meeting. You guys are lucky not to have me come here, I'm sure. Appreciated that. And the reason I did, and I didn't mention that, I sent you the email, is that the mayor of Claremont is Mayor Reese, and he's also the chairman of the Metro Light Rail, what they call it, the Gold Line Construction Authority. This is a significant enough money-wise thing for me. I mean, it's about $100 million, the two projects I spoke to, and I think they could save $100 million for the taxpayer. So I went there and talked, and I don't think anything will happen, but at least I feel good that I said my piece. Once I was there, though, they had mentioned they had a tree that came down. It crushed a car at a park, and a guy was talking there, and it caused like $50,000 worth of damage to his car, and he's really happy that he wasn't in the car. But as I was walking, I also noticed a tree like 2 weeks ago or so, a week ago. And I used my San Dimas app, and I put in a tree thing, and I said, this tree looks a little sickly. It had some damage to it. And we went out and looked at it, apparently, and they decided, yeah, that tree needs to be replaced, and they pulled the tree down. And I really appreciate how fast they respond to those kind of things. Light rail, currently they have some issues with the downtown connector. I went on it, there's a lot of graffiti, there's 20-minute headwinds. Cars are still dirty. The Citrus station is about 80% full today. Parking was being enforced, which I appreciate. There wasn't any questionable riders, which I appreciated. And then I looked, and their ridership now is up. Every month it goes up a little, but it's still only about, depending on the date and the statistic you look at, it's between 59 and 65% of the old pre-COVID type ridership. But I got some really good news, and something I really do feel good about. They've reinstated the fare checking, and this for me is a way to get people off the train that shouldn't be on there. And so in the last 3 weeks of July, they had contract security pull 11,841 ejections of non-paying riders, and the police sheriff ejected 3,875 more with 144 arrests. So they're pulling about 5,000 people a week off the train right now that shouldn't be on the train. It's a pretty significant number. It's got to make the safer environment, and it looks safer to me. I mean, it's a big step forward. I'm glad they're doing that, and I give them credit for that. And I thought it was really good news. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Mr. Lee.
Next speaker is Guy Bocili.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, City Council members, staff. Talking about water rates. I'm not sure how many of you got this notice from Golden State Water just the other day. Notice of application requesting to increase rates. They're proposing a almost 25% increase in water rates in 2025, followed by 2 more than 4% rate increases in the following years. So compounded, we're talking approximately 35% increase in water rates by 2027. This obviously impacts everybody who lives in San Dimas City, which pays for water, homeowners associations, individual homeowners. I photocopied just a short segment out of American States Water, that's the holding company for Golden State Water, from their annual report. And they say nothing says we're here for you like delivering the 68th consecutive year of annual dividend increases. For more than 2 generations, American States Water has provided a prudent choice for investors. Over the past 10 years, our stock has delivered a compound annual return of almost 17%. This doesn't really sound like the kind of company that needs to increase water rates 35%. I don't have the analytical capabilities to determine whether Golden State Water needs this kind of rate increase. I would suggest that the city would consult with other cities which Golden State Water serves, do some analysis, have staff look into it, and see what kind of numbers they use to justify this rate hike. To me, 35% on top of what's already an extraordinarily high water rate here in town seems exorbitant. So please, if you would, look into it, talk to other cities that are impacted, and then obviously the PUC in California is the determining entity, and perhaps stand up, go before the PUC in California and oppose the rate increase. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sherry, could you just talk with, thank you.
Mayor, those were all the speaker cards.
Anyone else wishing to speak to the council at this time? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent calendar. All items on the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be enacted in one motion unless a member of the city council requests a separate discussion.
Move approval.
Second.
Mayor, I just have a comment, not really for any action in particular, but just on item 4 on the consent calendar. It's about getting, allocating money for the design of reconstructing or improving Arrow Highway from one side of the city to the other. And so what's on the agenda tonight is just the allocation of money for the design. But the staff report mentions some good news, and that's that thanks to Congresswoman Napolitano, we have a federal grant coming our way for the actual construction of over $3 million, which is really a pretty good amount. And so I just wanted to mention that, and that that construction, we're hoping to start it July of this coming year, and that'll be a major improvement on a street that hasn't been really touched in about 20 years. So with that, I certainly support the motion.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries 5-0. At this time, we'll move on to other business, a discussion and consideration to provide authority to the city manager to discount and waive fees for parks and recreation programs and services. Chris Constantine.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the last city council meeting, Councilmember Nakano requested and Councilman Ebner concurred the agendizing of an item to allow the city manager to be granted authority to waive and discount fees, and predominantly with relations to park and recreation type of activities, but it wasn't restricted to just that. The council also desired, rather than what we regularly do, where we have this item as just a discussion item, and then we agendize another meeting to determine whether the merits of the case, you wanted to actually have that conversation now and determine whether you wanted to grant that authority, which would then be the direction to bring forth a resolution to grant that authority to me at a future meeting. It will provide for a more robust conversation. Due to the limited nature of work we can do on this item, since the council hasn't voted as a majority to take this on, I did do some research within the limitation of the 1 hour requirement. There are some cities out there that do grant waivers and reductions. They're varied in how they're done, but predominantly done by the city councils, or have a definitive policy approved by the council on how they're actually implemented by staff themselves. What I did is lay out, rather than trying to come up with the mechanism and manner, to just highlight the categories of areas that council can actually make a decision upon. Knowing that currently, you're going to be discussing the fee study resolution as our next public hearing item, the lion's share of all the fees are currently at a subsidized rate. So while under Prop 26 we've identified the true cost, we are not charging the true cost for very many of the programs, including our parks and recreations activities. So to the extent that we grant a waiver or a discount, it would be a further subsidy by the general fund for any of these activities. In terms of looking at whether or not you grant authority, there are 5 categories I outlined with the bolds here on how you can grant that authority. One could be just a general authority to allow the city manager to determine how to best waive or discount fees, in which case I would be defining an internal policy in conjunction with the department heads of how to be able to provide that type of flexibility to requests that come forth. To then, in addition to that general authority, you could put a funding restriction where you can indicate, well, every year you're granted authority to waive or discount no more than X dollar amounts of any fees for services that we provide in the city. You could also take the third category, which you just provide a very limited, restricted authority, which you just define maybe parks and recreation programs or certain parks and recreation programs where that waiver could occur. And it could be a general waiver authority that I have or authority limited to a certain dollar amount. The fourth category, you can provide very specific restrictions and how to apply any discounts or waivers. So you could define, okay, we want you to have the authority to grant these only in the following instances, and you can outline that. But that would take a very robust conversation with the council to define what those criteria actually are, so that we could define that, put it in a policy, and apply it consistently to anybody making the request. Or the council can decide, the fifth category, just to have that authority granted at the council level, where the council could decide and would have to decide on whether to waive or discount a fee. The concern I would have with some of these options, by granting authority, I don't have an issue with being granted authority. The concern that I have is I've worked really hard internally to define policies, processes, contracts, and to apply those in a very equitable and objective manner across activities that we perform. And so I want to avoid the instance where I'm being asked, waive fees for this, this person comes and make a decision to waive fees or discount fees, but somebody else comes on the other side and you make a differing decision, and then being caught in the middle of why did you do it in one case and why did you do it on the other. And it's going to be hard in a policy to define that without being in a position where we may be giving somebody more deference than the other. So I would need some guidance if the council decided to grant that authority, how you want me to execute that authority. So with that, I'll turn it back to the council for discussion, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to speak to this matter?
Sure, I can. So the request came out of a particular request from someone who had students, and in this case, I don't think it really applies because there were some other things that made it not likely, which the city manager can go into privately. I don't want to reveal that. But it did raise a question where we have people who can't afford our fees, as discounted as they are, right? We have a population, and we believe in access. We believe that things like our run and other types of activities, our fees shouldn't be a barrier. And so by providing some measure of waiver that would allow for quick decision-making, that was what prompted this. Because if we were to go the city council route, most people are probably not going to, you would need at least a month, right? You would need to ask for some sort of a waiver. A city council member would have to add it to the agenda. That would have to be discussed and decided, and then we would get back to them. So you're talking about a minimum of a month, which isn't realistic. A lot of times people are registering for things or want to participate close to the last minute. So, you know, in thinking through our programs, I don't really envision a significant cost. And I wanted to provide the city manager and the Parks and Recs director with the authority to be able to make those decisions on the fly so that we can maximize access to our programming within a reasonable time frame that someone would expect to sign up. My thinking is around a week or even a few days before seems reasonable. So that is where this came from, because the current process, in my view, is not very workable for the majority of use cases. So with that, I thank the City Council for their consideration, and I'll turn it over to you to weigh in on this matter, since I was the person who brought this forward.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to speak?
Thanks, Eric, for bringing this forward. And we do want to make all of our events and programs available to as many people as possible. And if there's a barrier, we want to see if we can overcome that barrier. In this case, maybe the cost of registering or participating. Looking at the options, and I appreciate, Chris, the 5 options that you gave us here, so we sort of covered the gamut. I probably wouldn't want to do the general authority because I feel that could change from one city manager to another. So we may say, oh, Chris, you're great at making judgment calls on this particular event or that, and here's what the discount should be. But on the other hand, I think that puts a burden on our city manager that maybe he shouldn't have to carry. And then, as I say, the next city manager could be like, I'm not charging anything for anything, so everybody gets it in free. So, or the other, nobody's getting a discount. But if we're going to do any of those, I would like to go with the directed authority. As Chris said, maybe Eric, you said it, we need a robust discussion about what the parameters of giving waivers and discounts would be. So I'd like the City Council to retain the authority to approve a policy, if we're going to do it, and have that discussion at the council level rather than the city manager creating a policy by himself.
So I will say first off, thank you for bringing up this item, and I commend you for the intent that's behind this and the use case that you're trying to solve. This isn't an easy topic to tackle. I spent a lot of time and quite a bit of beverages this weekend marinating on this particular request of yours. And you know, I think there's 2 things that come to mind for me. One is that, you know, when you look at the fee study that we're about to talk about next, and when you look at where we're at already, the city is already providing a substantial subsidy to all of these programs. And I understand that it still could be out of reach for some. But I also think that, on the other hand, we are up here trying to be the best stewards of public funds overall, right? And so when we do that, you know, we're using general taxpayer money in one effect or another to be able to do that. And I do have concern, as was raised by the city manager, as it relates to the equity of distribution and request. And while I think there is an opportunity to have a discussion at that might be suitable for council, I absolutely am opposed to having that authority be with any member of staff, and specifically the city manager. The International City-County Management Association's Code of Ethics, specifically Tenet 1, talks about equity and the manager's ability to perform their job. And there's another tenet that talks about them refraining from becoming political. And there's been other considerations council's had in the past that I've brought that up again, because sometimes there is a tendency from any governing body to look at their executive director, their manager, and have a tendency to try to delegate some authority that may put them in a quandary. So for that reason, you know, I appreciate the options that have been provided by staff. You know, Emmett always used to say, you know, how do we get to yes? So I've really spent some time thinking about how to help solve your problem that maybe is an alternative. In my mind, and after talking with some folks in the community, I think there's a lot of community and faith-based organizations and businesses that would be willing to support people who were looking for assistance to get into these programs. And so while I hear John's request, my preference would be that the city directs the city manager to write a letter requesting that the Chamber of Commerce, on behalf of the city, reaches out to all of our civic organizations in the community, as well as our faith-based and community-based organizations, to ask them if they would contribute to a fund to be established and perhaps maintained either by the chamber or another non-governmental entity, to create opportunities for that fund to be utilized to cover requests such as this so that people can get into these organizations, into these events rather. I looked at so many other scenarios about this to be fair to the school district, and that's really the other piece of this that came to mind is, you know, Chaparral and some of the other schools in our area where you have people who may meet this criteria potentially that you're describing. And then I thought about how is it that they've been helped in the past. And so most of them, 3 that I was able to learn about, have gone to either PTAs or they've gone to Rotary or they've gone to other organizations who have gladly, because we're not talking big dollars here mostly, been happy to say, hey, yeah, we'll sponsor that. And in fact, there's some local businesses too, which is why I think the chamber is a good opportunity to do it, who might be interested in some notoriety to sponsor some of these teams or some of these groups. So that's my preference. I think this is a little sticky as it relates to the policy implication for both council and staff. But I do think there's a way to achieve it. And I think it's probably engaging those civic organizations and the chamber and really putting the good people that we know are here to work. And I know a lot of the churches too have done amazing things in getting people to places. So those are my thoughts.
I'm kind of the same opinion. When I first heard this come up, I immediately thought about, you know, the nonprofit aspect of it, that there are nonprofits elsewhere that are filling this very similar need. And we have a robust community in San Dimas, and I think that for the most part, when there is a need, it always gets filled. So I actually really like the idea of the Chamber of Commerce because our businesses really are the backbone of the community. And I think that they would be jumping at an opportunity to help out, as we heard from Mr. Foster tonight. We had a need in 29 Palms even for a food drive, and our residents and business community was all over it. So that's where I'm at with that. I completely agree. I don't really want to put Chris in a tenuous spot when it comes to deciding who does or doesn't get any sort of discount or subsidy on our rates. That should be up to us. And then the other thing is that I think if there was a emergency type of thing, I would absolutely be in favor of even me individually paying out of pocket to get somebody who really needs to be at a race or what have you. We would make sure amongst either the council or and me, myself individually, just make sure that they get there too. So I know it's, I think when I looked at this and thought about it, the mechanism that would need to be put in place to make it happen and make it happen equitably would just be so large and kind of unwieldy that I don't know that it would serve the purpose that we're looking to fill. It would just be a lot to navigate just because of all the processes that we'd have to go through to get there. So,
Thank you. You know, I've thought about this for about 2 weeks. And, you know, I have to agree that I do not believe that we should commit the city manager to having to make a decision like that, based on the fact that he's absolutely right. It didn't, you know, we're all a little selfish. You know, what we want this or we want that. And then now Chris has got to decide, hey, I'm going to do this because Emmett asked me or because John asked me. The reality is there's got to be some type of criteria that needs to be put out there. And quite honestly, I've listened to Ryan's evaluation of it, and I had been out talking to some folks, talking to people with Rotary, talking to the one place I did not talk to was the chamber, and I'm not sure which organization would be better suited for it. But unfortunately, some of the people that I spoke to, their first thing that I spoke, that when talking to them, to people in, residents, they says, well, who's making these decisions when you're already subsidizing so many Parks and Rec events already? And how do we know, is there going to be a rule that says you have to be a resident of San Dimas? And as we all know, our school district now has students from all over the valley because their parents either work here or whatever. So I think, as Mr. Weber said, the mechanism would be so large. Now, John mentioned the fact that we should have a more robust conversation about it. And I'm not sure that I disagree with that. But at this point, I would have a very difficult time committing, the city manager to doing this type of deal without a conversation about it, a more robust conversation, as you used the word. But I have to tell you, in my heart, I just don't think, even with a robust conversation, I could get there through this. And I do, and I'm glad that Ryan and Eric brought up the fact that the chamber, we're throwing the chamber out front without ever even talking to them. So I think I'd rather see a conversation between Parks and Rec, and of which I'm sure that, as I know, that the city manager makes it very clear he's an ex officio member of all those commissions, so he would be involved in it. But I see a couple of representatives from the chamber here, and I'm seeing them shake their head as agreement that they should be talked to about it first. So at this point, I would vote no against this, but I would also be very open to some furtherance of it, because there are kids out there that need to participate, but we need to make sure our community is handled. And the young lady was here a little earlier with AYSO, representing Laverne, representing San Dimas. Kids need a place to play. Kids want to participate. And we're having a 5K, and these kids are coming from all over the valley. And who's to say who's paying for this or whatever? It's not very much money, I realize, but we're right now going to look at a fee schedule where we're going to be tapping. Every time we tap into the fees for Parks and Rec or any other place, it's affecting the entire community of 35,000 people, and not just that small portion that wants to participate in this. So I have no problem with you discussing it with chambers, see if they wanted to do something about it, and maybe we could bring this back at some point and discuss what you find out what the chamber might be interested in doing. But that's just me.
What do you think, Eric?
I thank the council for the robust discussion and their input. I appreciate that they gave consideration to this. Although it is a small amount of money, they certainly thought through all the implications of this, and I'm grateful for that. Given that there is not support to move forward with this, I think for now it makes sense to table this and continue our discussion for tonight. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I would, I hear you. I actually would move that the council directs the city manager to engage in a discussion with the San Dimas Chamber of Commerce, as well as any other community or faith-based organization or other non-governmental organization as they deem appropriate, in hopes of establishing a fund to be maintained outside of the city government to support the cause as it relates to the spirit of this topic, and come back to the council when they find the program and come back with a proposal or at least a process that can be shared with the council on how the community can support folks who may not be able to cover their fees through a partnership done with the community.
I'm in agreement with that. I think it's a need. It's definitely a need, and we've recognized it and identified it, and I think if we can make some effort to try to fill it, that'd be fantastic.
Is that a second?
Okay, at this point, we had Mr. Nakano recommend we table the matter. Now do we have to have a second on tabling it, or do we move on to?
I can withdraw my,
The request was to table, but there was no action taken to table. So now we have a motion by Councilmember Raviena and a second by Councilmember Weber. And I will repeat this, to direct the city manager to engage in discussion with the chamber as well as any other community or faith or other non-governmental organization as deemed appropriate by staff to maintain a fund outside of the city government to support the cause and the spirit of this item, and to come back to the council with a proposal or at least a process on how the city can support participation with our programs.
Or in partnership with them to get people to our programs.
Or in partnership with these organizations.
In other words, if someone comes to the city and goes to Parks and Recs and said, hey, I have a group of X, 5, 10 kids, whatever, they can't get to this, that staff could have a process to direct them to whether it's the chamber, whoever's going to maintain this fund, that could be a collaboration of other entities to help them cover the fees to be able to participate. Okay.
So we have a first and have a motion and a second.
Yes.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries 5-0. Do we have any restriction on that, the amount of time that you're going to spend with this?
No, now that the council has formally acted 5-0, I have the authority to spend the time, and this priority will just be figured into all the priorities of all our projects.
Okay, thank you. And once again, thanks a lot, Eric, for bringing this forward.
thank you.
I will echo that. Thank you. And as I personally know, it doesn't always look like what you hope it might be when you start it, but it was a great topic, and we're going to get there.
We have 5 views that have to be in discussion, and I appreciate the forum to be able to do that. So I come in with no preconceived outcome. I appreciate everybody's input and the angle that they bring, as always.
Thank you. Okay, we have a public hearing, review, and a discussion for approval of Resolution 2023-58 to revise the city fee schedule and an effective date of December 4th, 2023, and approve the September 2023 user fee study and cost of allocation study or allocation plan to establish the cost to deliver services as justification for the application fees, changes proposed, and revised fee schedule. Michael Bryan, Administrative Services.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. Michael O'Brien, Administrative Services Director. Before I begin the discussion, I do have one minor correction to make on the fee schedule. It is going to be under the Public Works section, number PW 5.00. The current description is inspection permits issuance fee. It needs to be changed to inspection permits - application / issuance fee.
You have a page on that?
I do not have it. Do you have it on the? I believe it's page 315.
Thank you.
All right, with that said,
Just a question.
Yeah.
Do these screens actually present anything?
if we had a presentation to go up, you would see it.
All right, thanks. You don't have one?
Their messaging or we're on break, that kind of thing would come up.
Got it.
It's very fancy, I know. All right, the item before you for tonight's public hearing is a request to approve Resolution 2023-58 to revise the city fee schedule and approve the final version of the user fee study and cost allocation plan, which provides justification for the proposed fees by demonstrating that the fee is not greater than the cost to deliver the service. The proposed fees were determined not only by considering what full cost recovery is, but also considering what is being charged by our most comparable neighboring cities. to suggest fees that lowers the burden on the general taxpayer to provide the service, as well as remaining competitive to avoid deterring future developments or improvements. The user fee study and cost allocation plan were presented to the City Council and the public during a study session on August 22nd, 2023. The basis for determining the full cost of each service and how staff determined the suggested fees were presented by staff, along with Tony Thrasher from Wildan Financial Services, who is here tonight to help me answer any additional questions. The PowerPoint presentation, which is included in the agenda packet, was discussed in detail during that study session. After the study session presentation, Council approved moving forward with the user fee study and using those figures as a base for revised fee schedule to be considered for adoption at tonight's meeting. As staff, we greatly appreciate your consideration towards this matter and acknowledge that we are asking you to approve tonight is not going to get you any pats on the back or glowing reviews on social media. In the short term, you'll likely hear some complaints about the increase in fees. I can relate with the public in this, and I feel the same frustration when I go to the gas pump and I see that what I was once paying $2 a gallon for is now $6, or a carton of eggs that I used to pay $4 for is now $7. The cost for goods and services keeps increasing with the dollar becoming less and less valuable, and the city is not immune to that. Asking residents, business owners, or developers to pay more for a service is never going to be a popular decision. However, we must ask ourselves, what is the alternative? Would you rather say to a stakeholder that they must pay for the services utilized that creates a direct benefit for them and assures their safety and the look and feel of the community, which has made San Dimas such a wonderful place to live, work, and shop? Or would you rather say that, or would you rather get to the point where we must reduce services that affect the majority of the community because we no longer have the resources to maintain the city's infrastructure, facilities, or to continue certain programs and services? The cost to deliver services and requests for additional services continue to increase, and federal funding, which has helped the city to fund these activities, will be going away at the end of the fiscal year, which will be leaving a gap that needs to be filled. Increasing the fees for services that mainly benefit a specific party that is utilizing the service is a justifiable means to collect much-needed revenues, rather than ask every San Dimas taxpayer to absorb the cost of these services at the expense of the needs of the greater community that are in line with our mission statement and council priorities. Public safety, parks, roads, events, programs, and the condition of our facilities all suffer when we don't recoup the cost of service for those responsible for pooling the resources from their intended purpose. I would also like you to consider the value of the service being provided and if the fee is justified. The cost for permits, plan checks, engineering reviews, etc., assure the safety not only of the resident or the business owner, but all that who visit the work or work at the home or business that the service was purchased for. Not holding contractors or developers accountable can lead to destruction of property or much worse harm to individuals. Our services give those properties and individuals the best chance to assure what is being done conforms to the standards set by code. Adjusting the fees not only puts them at the point where that there are more in line with the cost of doing business, but it also helps the city to meet its financial needs for operating and maintaining the needs as the primary driver behind this effort to approve the resolution before you tonight. With that, I recommend that you approve Resolution 2023-58, and Mr. Thrasher and I are available to answer any additional questions.
I want to add one additional correction. The correction that Michael placed was on page 315. It's the fourth line, and that's the description. I'd like to also make the following changes, which is non-material. Under the budget policies, we classify our fees in certain categories, the more important ones being Category 1 and Category 2. Category 1 is a full cost recovery, which some of these fees actually are. Category 2 is a fee that is subsidized, which under the policy also requires a justification for it. I like when you approve that resolution to also grant the authority to revise the table on categories 1 and 2 to properly reflect which they are, because I think all of them are labeled as Category 1 when a lot of them are subsidized. And the justification is to align the fees to be competitive with other agencies in the categories specified. With that, we'll turn it back to the council.
Bringing it back here, do you have any type of a guesstimate on a percentage of fees that you're going to classify down to Category 2s?
The spreadsheet already includes a percentage subsidy number, so anywhere where the percentage subsidy is not 0 would most likely be a Category 2. If the subsidy, let's say I'm looking at a $467 fee, which is the cost, and the fee charge is recommended to be $467, that's a 0% subsidy. That would be a Category 1.
So, thank you. Okay, any questions of Michael or our expert?
I do have a few questions before the public hearing. These are questions. So the first question relates to the fee study, and specifically page 6 of the fee study, or in the agenda packet, page 224 and 225. So those 2 pages. This all is about the full cost of providing whatever service or fee or event we're talking about. Am I in the right spot, Michael? 224.
Are you talking about the fully burdened rates?
Yes, I have a question. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page, literally.
Absolutely. Sure.
Okay, great. So the fully burdened hourly rates, and there's a number of things that go into that, and taking that along with some statements on the next page. It says that the fully burdened hourly rate, or the full cost, let's call it that, includes department overhead and citywide costs. With that definition in mind, I'm going to give you 3 or 4 examples of things that may or may not be included in that. So in other words, the fees, the full cost would include such things, or maybe not, but let me give all 4 of them. Mowing the lawn at Horse Thief Canyon Park on the soccer fields, where the soccer teams play. Regular scheduled street sweeping, just regular old street sweeping, where the Run and Scared 5K is going to be held. In other words, is that street sweeping, the cost of that somehow allocated, part of that into the fee for what we're saying is the full cost. Routine monthly power washing downtown, again, a routine thing we do, but there's a car show held there every year, and so if I'm not even sure if we charge them a fee, we probably do, but if there's a fee there, would the full cost of that include, would that power washing be part of it? Or how about coffee that staff drinks? Just here in City Hall during the regular workday, is that part of the overhead that we're talking about? I'm trying to get an idea. Repairing a street in Villa Verde, I mean, is that somehow percentaged down into how much of that would actually be part of a fee for Tiny Tots program, or registering for renting the facility over here, or anything like that?
No, and your actual categories put it in a very good light. So what that's specifically referring to is central service functions being allocated to the operating departments that they're supporting. So in the case of, say, street maintenance or park maintenance, we are not allocating those costs. So those costs reside directly within the department and are not spread to the departments and to the programs themselves. Okay. Insofar that we're talking about, say, use of facilities, a lot of those costs end up getting spread throughout the city because the departments that work on them are also spread in different places. And so the cost recovery that we represent within, for, say, Parks and Recreation or facility use, those are the direct costs that are budgeted or charged to those departments. And so if park maintenance costs, those contracts are residing within a separate piece, they are not included within that calculation. It's just a fact of the nature that a lot of the facilities and the parks and recreation usage type fees, there's a lot of support costs that go into those. And so whenever we're doing this type of study, we're more representing the direct costs that are involved with providing them as opposed to the ancillary but required costs in order to maintain those facilities at the same time.
So ancillary and required costs, so you're saying those are not included in the full cost of the whatever event it happens to be, or they are?
So building maintenance would, because we could identify that and allocate that within the cost allocation plan, but the park maintenance would not be, because that would be required for your medians and a lot of general space. It is not directly attributable to a department. So whenever there's any case where there's kind of a dual usage or dual support being provided, we only want to include those costs which we could reasonably tie to the services being provided, so that we're not cross-collecting or trying to collect a cost that is not attributable to the service receiver.
All right, so an example of that caught my eye was in And I'm going, all the fees and things like that that I'm going to talk about are in that attachment that is with the fee study. So it's not the one attached to the resolution, so, but I'll tell you the page number. So the credit card recovery fee, it's on page 30 of that attachment, page 248 of the agenda packet. So page 248, I'm going to get to that myself if I can. And one of the interesting things about this is that it says that, so the credit card fee, that's one of those we're wanting to increase to 4% of whatever fee it applies to. But it says that the full cost, this is over in the fourth to the last column, it says the full cost is not 2%, is not 4%, but the full cost is literally 17% of the cost of the program. So for, pick any old program you're talking about, event, are you saying that using a credit card is costing 17% of the full cost of that program?
So the calculation of that percentage is also including the staff that's involved with doing the receipts and managing of your vendors for the credit cards as well. And so it's including all of that. So it's not just the direct cost that you're being charged by the credit card vendors, but it's also including the staff time involved with those receipts and transactions, specifically when it regards to credit cards, as opposed to, say, a check. So the check does not require the same kind of level of effort and involvement with the credit card vendors.
One thing to add to that calculation is also factoring in the revenues that are generated from processing credit cards. So if we were to generate a higher volume of credit card purchases, that rate would go down because the cost of staff time is the same whether we're collecting $100 or if we're collecting $1 million. So just because of how it's calculated off of that revenue base makes it look like a much higher number.
Okay.
So that's why when we're really trying to look at what's a reasonable number, and again, when we looked at other cities and what's comparable and what makes sense, we landed on the 4%. Legally, could we say, oh, we're going to do full cost recovery to 17% based on the calculation? Yes, but we believe that's unreasonable. So that's where we went with 4% to get back just not only the fees from the merchant, but to get a small amount of staff time back from that.
Okay, two more questions, one more on credit cards. So I read recently that there's a brand new law, I think it was passed or it's going to be signed this week or last week, and I'm not sure when it goes into effect, but it was dealing with, we've all had this experience. I went and saw a concert the other day at the Greek Theater, and it was Neil Young, by the way, and it was great. But, you know, it says the ticket is whatever it was, $125, very expensive. But by the time I'm done, I'm paying like $250 per ticket, right? Because there's all these service charges, convenience fees, whatever. The law says, well, all of those extra fees have to be in the advertised price. So no, your price is not $125. Your price is whatever, $250 or whatever it was. And so, and by the way, I can only afford that every now and then, so it's not like I'm going to that expensive in a concert all the time. But anyway, is that going to affect us in our programs where we've got a $20 fee to enter the race, for example, and next year are we going to have to say that that's $20.80 in our guide or whatever number we come up with, because that has to be disclosed up front, or is that something that just is dealing with concerts and stuff like that?
Yeah, so that is primarily focused on kind of the public, for private, but for you all, it's a convenience fee. And so, and only public entities are allowed to even charge for the convenience fee of credit card usage. And so this is, I guess the prime thing to key on is it's not required to use your credit card for payment for much of these types of things. Maybe for the online type thing, you can consider it, but that it would also be disclosed at the time of paying. So it's not going to be something that comes after the fact anyway. So it would also not be in conflict with that.
Okay, good.
And we do post the amount of the processing fee on the windows when you're going there. We say it to them before we process a credit card. And on the online systems as well, all the payment methods, it does tell you what the credit card fee would be. So they are forewarned prior to submitting payment that that is a
good.
fee that's assessed.
Satisfied with that. The last one was, I don't know if you can answer this one, but just in the realm of homeowners doing things to their house that need fees, and I just listed a water heater, for example. You're supposed to get a building permit for a water heater, and I'm not sure if there's an inspection fee or whatever. But as far as what kind of increase we're looking at for things like that, maybe using a water heater as an example, how much does it cost now to put in a water heater as far as city fees go? And will that be increasing, and what will it be increasing to?
Yeah, so in the study, based on the fees that were presented at the time when this study started, the increase would be 20%. So let's say in the water heater example is $100, it'd be increasing by 20%, so it'd now be $120 for a water heater permit. I would note, though, that there have been a couple of CPI increases that the county has incorporated since this study started. So it won't net out to a full 20% when we get down to what the new charge is, because we are trying to base it off of what our cost based on the study is. So it's really going to be, since we had 8.5 and I believe 3.7, it's really going to be about a 7.8% increase around there. That's going to actually affect the prices going forward as opposed to where they currently are at.
Yeah, and so to directly answer that question, so the permit for a water heater would be, the current as of this was $19.60, and it would be going up to $23.52.
With an actual cost of $33.23, so the subsidy is 29%.
Right.
Perfect. Great answers. Thanks a lot. That's all I've got for now.
Anyone else, any further questions?
How about for a solar panel?
So solar panel.
Dude,
no.
I don't. We ain't got time for that. Come on.
Just one simple question. We're doing this fee study now. Michael, could you please tell us, or do you know, when the last fee study the city embarked upon? I've been here for quite some time, and I know John's been here for quite some time. I don't remember a fee study that we did any time, in recent, so our prices have been our prices for quite some time. And so do you have any idea when the last fee study was? Because these all numbers are when you look at the whole schedule, they're mind-boggling because there's so many and there's so different. I know that within the parts, conditional use permits are to a local developer, or when he comes in and sits at the counter, he's going to be sitting here saying, oh, wait, it was this. Even though he could go across the street to another city, and the fee you're telling him now is still cheaper than the fee that's across the street or whatever. So it's going to be, major changes. It's not like a $20 going up to $33 for a water heater. It's going to go from X dollars to great dollars.
Michael had told me earlier it was something like August 1960.
I can tell you, in looking through our records, I've not found an official user fee, full citywide fee study that I could reference you to. The closest thing I found was a study that was done on parking permit fees that was done in the 80s, and those fees are the same fees that are being charged today. So I can tell you a lot of these fees are decades old. It's great that we've been able to do this for a long time and still run the city in a decent way, but I mean, we're at the point where we really had to look at this and get it to a normal market value for providing these services, because it's just where we're headed that we need to make this adjustment, so.
Well, that's why the fee study's good. However, fees have gone up. I mean, there may be some that are the
Permit
same,
fees,
but-
I've kept up with the county, but
So-
it hasn't kept up with our costs for.
Oh, I understand that. I'm just saying that we don't want to leave the impression that we've haven't increased fees in
Right.
40 years.
Sure.
No, we have increased fees, and in the building side, tracking along the lines of what the county was. The intent of doing a fee study was, one, we didn't have a location where the majority of our fees were in one location, and two, we didn't have a comprehensive study that looked at all our fees to validate, are you charging cost or below the cost of providing that service? And so the study satisfies that, and the unfortunate nature that a lot of these fees have not been updated regularly, and so you'll see a change. But one of the items we requested directors to do was to start taking some of the common fees and compare them against other cities, that even though our cost, let's say a conditional use permit, shows from about $1,090 is going up to $5,000, with our cost being about $5,300, other jurisdictions, as the consultant related the last time this was presented, could range upwards of $6,000 to $10,000. So even if we could say, yes, it's $12,000, but we're out of the realm of what's competitive with other cities, we didn't want to charge $12,000. We wanted to charge something that was more in line with other jurisdictions, which is why you see the significant subsidies here in the fees we're approving. Lastly, there is a OMB, Office of Management Budget Overhead rate, which there's a study you could perform, which then makes us eligible to apply this fee to any federal grants we receive for administrative overhead. If you don't have that rate, which we don't have, we can't charge that administrative cost to a federal grant program that may provide that reimbursement.
All right, and then since a couple of my councilmen have centered on one particular fee, I'm going to center on a fee that's probably going to, I just have some concerns. We just came out of a pandemic, so a lot of things have changed, but a lot of our small businesses, our small restaurants have had outside dining, and they started to rely on it to be able to come out of this hole that they got built by basically no fault of their own. And so my question is, I don't want to burden a small restaurant or small food place that's trying to get their business back up and running with having to come up with some large fee, like a conditional use permit fee of $4,000 or $5,000 or $5,000 or more to do something. So I'd like to just make sure that I can't support that type of fee for somebody who's trying to make their business, and I realize it's restaurants, these outside dining and things like that, but I'd like to have either Henry or Michael speak to that.
I'd bring staff up to give us an estimate of what it would cost to do an outdoor dining location, roughly, and whether or not the conditional use permit, which is the most significant fee, would apply in that case.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. So a CUP wouldn't be required to provide for outdoor dining, so that fee wouldn't be affected. To convert parking spaces or to add outdoor dining to an existing facility, trying to look at what some of these. I'm assuming it would just be plan check fees. They wouldn't even go through any type of other entitlement required for that.
What do you think plan check fees would be for a small place trying to do it?
It all
I mean,
depends.
we could sit here and say they're going to be $10. In reality, they're going to come out to $5,000.
It just depends on what
I
they're
just don't want to
proposing.
see those type of businesses who we allowed them to do it under the emergency order, then we took it down, and then we kind of like a little lackadaisical because obviously the COVID came back, and I know people are looking now. They want to do something to prepare their business for the next little hurdle, okay? And as we all know, COVID's not gone away. It's appears to be starting to ramp up again. So I want to make sure that if we're going to require them to do something more permanent that we're amenable to helping them out.
Correct.
Okay, and
Yeah, and staff was always willing to come up with a solution that will work for business owners and property owners. But I can't give you an estimate. It just depends on what they're proposing. So if they're proposing a permanent trellis or a solid roof structure and outdoor heating, TVs, like, it just depends on what they're proposing. So I wouldn't be able to give you an exact estimate.
Yeah, I can help a little bit with the framing of it because you do have current fees that surround those activities. And so based off of the current fees and where they would be going, it would be a 20% increase on those, but you're currently sub 70% cost recovery, I believe. So you would still retain over a 30% subsidy on those services. And so those are the kind of more minor increases on those. You're tied to the LA County schedule, which is also lower on the lower end because they have a lot of diminishing scale for their services as well because they serve such a broad area.
The conditional use permit, as we talked before, is the most substantial piece. If that applied, then that would be a dramatic increase. There's quite a number of plan check fees depending on, is there storm drain, storm water work that needs to be done? Is there grading that needs to be done, which is amongst the more expensive plan check fees, or electrical? So depending on what they're going to propose, those fees would attach, but some of the fees range from like $111 to $300. They're not substantial, but if at some point something is being proposed or on a regular basis something's being proposed and the fee we believe is too burdensome, city still has the opportunity to take a look at that and make a change, a discount, a moratorium, look at a higher subsidy to those classifications of fees for an economic development purpose, and we can just come back and address those. I do not believe right now the fees as they're going to be set for outdoor dining should be a burden on our restaurants to do that outdoor dining.
Yeah, in a couple cases, like the conditional use permit, which there's a substantial work and those projects are quite involved. So that wouldn't be that sort of thing. It also likely wouldn't even be a minor deviation. Those are, even after this study, the recommendation is $711. So even with those, it wouldn't even qualify for that as well.
That brings up a question that I have now. Since this takes effect December 4th, if a restaurant were to be so inclined and appreciate the current fee structure, if they were to get something submitted or an application submitted before then, would they be grandfathered in at that old price?
The fees would attach when they make the application. So if the application is done prior to that date, the old fees would apply.
Thanks.
all right. Any further conversation? Any further questions? At this time, we'll open up the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak to this matter, please come up to the podium and voice your concern or ask your question. Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the council. Anyone wishing to?
I'll just say, one, good job to staff. I think there was a lot of work done on this, and I think, when I first got on council, I think some of the hardest things to do is to look at the revenue sources, look at the fees, and then, really be transparent about what's happening. And I think over the last few years, the city's made some significant strides in being more transparent about where we're at financially, and not just producing papers that, we publish, but I think really talking about it, and I think really presenting the information in a way that the public and the council can digest it and understand it. Michael's making it harder and harder for me not to support some of these presentations he gives because, in fact, I feel that you guys have done a really good job in telling the story on how we got to where we got to and why it is important that we do what we should do for the city. So with that, and I think your comments were probably on point, this is not something I normally would feel really great about supporting, and I'm not saying I feel great about supporting it, but I am saying that I think you've done a really good job in framing the need and the necessity for the city. I think the citizens, the community, and the business community and developers have benefited for a long time. But I do think, as the mayor, I think, shared not too long ago, that a local business recently opened and, you know, I don't want to say was bragging, but was very forthcoming on how affordable it was to develop in our city and their willingness to even pay more as it related to their establishment if that's what was required. So for that, I would support this as proposed by staff with the modification as introduced by the city manager, and I would make that a motion.
I'd second that motion.
Any further discussion?
Yes, I have, definitely. I have a suggestion on 6 fees that I'd like to, like the council to entertain modifying. So I can give the page numbers, but I've got them, you can look them up, but I'll give the page numbers. The first one is the credit card convenience fee. It's on page 248. The suggestion or the proposal is that it increase from $2 for a transaction to $5. I think that's a large increase, especially for families that are registering for programs and events in the city that, you know, that can be a little bit of a bite. So I would propose reducing that from $5, from an increase to $5 to $3, or I maybe could support $4, because I've seen that elsewhere. I haven't seen $5, but I'm not saying it's not out there. So that's one thing. I would support a lower credit card percentage.
John, I'm sorry, are you talking about the parking overnight pass for $2, $5? You're talking about credit cards?
You know what? What's the credit card one?
The credit card is the 4%.
4%. Okay, scratch the credit card one.
There may be...
And you're right. I was looking at my notes, and
It's the parking.
it's the parking. That's what, it's on the same line for some reason. So it's the parking on page 251, and it's the overnight parking fee of $2 to $5. And I just don't think $5 is a reasonable amount. It's good for cost recovery, but I don't think it's a thing that is in line with what people typically would pay. So I would want a lower fee for overnight parking. The same thing I just said, except for the overnight parking fee. The second one was on page 252. It was the fine for a bicycle parked on a sidewalk. This fine is currently $10, and we're talking about it being raised to $48. And I think that's exorbitant for a lot of people. And I find it hard to believe that if a couple kids go down to Roadies or the hardware store and park their bikes up against the building, they don't use a bicycle rack, but they're parked on the sidewalk, that we're literally going to be asking them or their families to pay $48 each for the bicycle being parked there. $10 is a good enough lesson, in my opinion, for to teach somebody about not parking on the sidewalk. And maybe we want to increase it to 20 or 25, but 48 is just out of line, in my opinion. The third one is on page 256, and it's the rental for the equestrian arena. We're changing that from $100 to $500. I don't have a problem with that in general, but I think for nonprofits, we should have a lower fee. So maybe a couple $100 for nonprofits for the rental of the equestrian arena, and not $500, because I think that would be a barrier to nonprofits doing some horse-related activities in the arena. Again, I realize cost recovery, it's lower whenever we're not doing the fees that you're suggesting. Okay. The next one is the individual sign fee. So talk about small businesses. We're increasing that fee from $83 to $400 for somebody to come and talk about a sign.
Page?
Oh, sorry, that's on page 261. So it's the sign fee. Again, I think it should be increased, but $400 for somebody for Pizzettos to come in and say, I want to talk about a sign on the back of my building, and this is per sign, or a business that wants to change out their signs, and they've got a couple signs, and now you're asking them to pay $800 to change out a couple signs. I think that's just a lot. And again, I didn't see I was trying to go over everything line by line. I'm not saying I saw everything, but that's definitely one. The last one is, you all know about the Mills Act. The Mills Act is a way of homeowners of historic homes or old homes that are deemed historic by the process to get a Mills Act designation, and that saves on their property taxes. So I understand the logic here where we're not charging anything now, and the suggestion is to charge $1,050. But I think that says to everybody that we're not really trying to encourage people to preserve their historic homes. And so I think there should be a much lower fee than that. I could say $500 maybe, but $1,000 just for the mills. And I understand, again, the cost recovery. Right now, we're not getting anything for it. And I know we don't have very many Mills Act applications, but it's kind of like the lemonade stand. You know, I'm not selling my lemonade, but if I can just sell that one $10 cup of lemonade, I'm going to recover some costs. But with the Mills Act, I would definitely lower that. I would go as high as 500. I mean, I'd like lower, but so those are the, whatever it was, 5 areas that I would request the maker of the motion to modify to take into consideration some or all of those suggestions.
Can staff address the
Of course.
request? I do not recommend making all those changes. So let me go through the different fees. Some of them you could make. The first one, there was an assessment done by Mr. Hartung in terms of what is being charged currently for the overnight parking. It doesn't reflect the annual parking permit. So you have to distinguish between the two. An annual parking permit's about $75 for the processing of that one. So if a resident has an extra car and wants to park it on the street, absolutely go through the annual parking permit process. It's relatively easy now that we've streamlined it a little bit more, and you got it for the whole year. It's when others come into the community and are going to park on the street, and it reflects the cost that our staff has to go out and validate and verify, get out of the car and validate that that's actually a car that should be parked on the street. So that one I would recommend keeping it at 5. The fine for the bicycle, you're right, that is a significant increase up to $48, but you also have to take into account that the officers and staff that enforce the law are not enforcing it with a black and white approach. There's a spirit to the law. So a couple of kids that park outside of the hardware store, which you're concerned about, I don't presume that our folks are going to go there and write a $48 citation to the kids. They have discretion, and they can apply that discretion. And so I think the penalty has to be substantial enough to not to be a burden for somebody to actually adhere to the law, not intended to be a hammer to hit somebody over the head with. So on that one, I don't see that increase being a burden on the population you're referring to. On the third one, rental for the equestrian arena, we currently have a 3-party agreement that allows for 4 events to occur up there, and there is no charge for that. We don't generally rent the arena at all. And so if we're going to open it up to now renting it, there is substantial impacts to folk that go up there. The entire area around the arena is dirt. The arena inside also has to be straightened. And so when you have events and activities, we start to utilize that, it isn't a cheap expense. And to the extent that you lower it to $200, even for a nonprofit, we're then subsidizing that activity. And so is it a nonprofit, any nonprofit, a city nonprofit? I would draw the parallel on the pool fee. The city used to have a nonprofit pool fee. We eliminated it. The district was paying $30 an hour to use the fee, and now they're at $160. So even though we could presume that it is a good use to discount the fee, it's the substantialness of the subsidy that's an impact on those. And then on the Mills Act designation, I don't believe that's going to be a substantially large number of homes. And so if we were charging 0, that one we could choose to subsidize to a higher degree to encourage folks to apply for the Mills Act. But there's also a trade-off to that. You know, Mills Act designation, less property tax is less revenue to the city, which is fine. But we have to recognize that the city's property tax increment is now at 6.5%, where it would have been in upwards of the 17 and 18% that it is in Laverne. Partly because an increment was taken away and given to formulate the fire district to provide fire service. So we're deriving less revenue from a property tax basis. And when we look at our total population of comparables, which is 12 other cities, out of all the 13 cities, which include us, where are we in terms of revenue generation per capita for property tax, sales tax, other fees that we accumulate? We're ninth. So Laverne, Glendora, Claremont generate more revenue to provide services than we do, and we're being asked by the council, by the public, to be compared to the services that they can provide. So to the extent that we erode some of these, not individually, but holistically, will impact our ability to provide the services. So that's something you would have to just consider.
Well, there are hundreds and hundreds of fees in the study, in the fee, and I support all of them except these 6. So I think the study was great, but I think we should look at it from 2 sides. So Chris has explained very well, and it's his job to explain how the city is going to make money, make more money than we have before. I'm not saying we're making all the money that we're spending and covering the full cost, but I'm saying that the focus is on getting more revenue. Nothing wrong with that. But I believe we have to look, in some cases, at the impact on the person who is paying the fee. Just as the mayor was talking a little while ago, and I fully support what he was saying, about making it as easy as possible, in this example, for somebody to do outdoor dining, and to literally waive fees if we need to create a bigger benefit for the city, which is outdoor dining, and the benefits that has, not only for the city of just having outdoor dining, because it's great, but for the people who want to go out and eat and just have a good time enjoying themselves and feeling that San Dimas is a great place to live and go out to dinner in. So of all the ones, I mean, maybe I could give a little bit on the others, but the bike on the sidewalk, I just don't, let's say it's one of our bikers that comes through town and he's stopping at Railside Cafe. If you go by there on Saturday, you usually see a bike parked out there. They're usually not in a rack, actually. So all these guys, and maybe they should know better, but I just don't think that $48 for violating that, and you know, if it's on the books, it should be enforced, is my feeling about it. So if there's a thing about bicycles not being on the sidewalk, they shouldn't be on the sidewalk. It's my feeling. So, and we should, you know, have bike racks that are convenient, everything else. So that's a lot. The equestrian arena, we're at $100 now, according to the fee schedule. And I'm just saying nonprofits, less than the $500. The sign fee, I mean, why is a business owner going to be charged $400 just to, and that's not for the sign, that's just to come in and talk about the sign and get the design approved. I understand it costs staff time, but I don't think that kind of burden should be on a business owner to pay $400 when it's $83 now. And so in these few limited cases, I'm not sure what the amount of money that we would not be getting is, but I think looking at the side of the user and the person who is doing whatever it is, I think we make it I personally think it's just a better community if we have a little bit of heart in some of these fees, the one I mentioned.
I would just add, I would look at 2 sides to the overnight parking permit fee, and those sides would be Glendora and Laverne, and both of those fees are $5 a night and have been for, I don't know about Laverne, but I know Glendora was $5 a night before I stopped working for them 7 years ago. So they've been there for a significant amount of time. So I don't believe that it's an overly burdensome thing to catch that up. And while I agree with you that if there's a law on the book, it should be enforced, the reality is that that just doesn't happen. I would inquire when the last time we wrote a ticket for a bike parked on the sidewalk. I'll probably bet just by the nature of that type of activity, somebody sets their bike on the sidewalk, goes in, gets something from a store, gets on their bike, and leaves before anybody from the city could even get there. So while, yes, it would be nice to say that we enforce every single law in the books, there are some that are by nature just not necessarily that enforceable, and I would say that's one. But with the Gold Line coming soon and a population of people that may or may not respect our community the same way that we do, maybe setting up camps and blocking our sidewalks and preventing access in our downtown for handicapped, wheelchair-bound people. I would prefer that we have a mechanism that would allow our staff to go down there and issue a citation that held some sort of weight, and would discourage that type of behavior, which is the more less dropping a bike off, going in and grabbing your thing, and more permanently occupying space in our sidewalks and preventing our residents from accessing the streets and sidewalks.
I would, one is I acknowledge and appreciate the fees and the reasoning it's brought up. I would have rather have heard it during the study session than the public hearing, to be fair. I'm not inclined to change the motion. I don't think it's fair to the council or to the city to make changes to those fees without comprehensively looking at the impact of the changes. And I was wrapping my head around some of the stuff you're talking about, and I think that I think when we had the discussion in the study session, I don't believe staff is really even stretching to recover what they really need to. And so, you know, I too see some fees that I may not personally agree with, and I'd love to not see them go up. But I don't believe that, staff has put forward increases here that are ill-intended or, going to be so far out of whack that it's not in line or even perhaps a savings compared to neighboring jurisdictions. So, for those reasons, I think passing the package as proposed, and then if there are things that come up later on down the road, so be it. But in the event of a substitute motion materializing or any other motion, I will not support any action this evening that modifies anything from what staff's proposed, that does not then go back, have the consultant and staff reanalyze any adjustments, and thus postpone this entire process. So,
I'm not going to do a substitute motion, but I'm glad you're aware of it. It's kind of like the defensive linebacker coming in and blitzing, and always the.
I'm always watching.
Of it.
Yeah, I'm always watching.
You know what? So it doesn't sound like there's support for changing any of the fees. I will just make a comment. I don't think this is hard to do at all. If there's like one or two fees that are there, it's just not hard to do. And I think it's, anyway, having said.
I have a hard time with, in the past, we've talked about some fees, and your response to me on some of those was, well, it's only $2. And so when I hear the logic in some of this, I too reminisce on some of those comments you've made to me, that some of those I understand the use, but at the same token, like you said in the past, it's only $2.
Reminiscing is definitely something to do.
But
But what I wanted to say is that, so there are a few things that I would have different, but by and large, I support the fee study and the fee schedule. So I will vote in favor of the motion. But I did want to make those comments, and if anybody wanted to support any of the changes, I'm open to that, but otherwise, I would support the motion.
If my memory is a little fuzzy, I know that the cost of the credit card transactions is 17%. I remember that being a major point of discussion during our study session. I vaguely remember us talking about concern about that. Would you remind us why we couldn't look at a lower rate? Because usually the processing fees when you do something else is around 2%. And I just feel it would be good for the public benefit to hear that and then reaffirm whether we want to still move forward with that. I really honestly can't remember where we landed with that. I know, again, it was a point of discussion.
Yeah, so our discussion was centered around what is the true cost and how did we get to even the 4%. So we were basically getting to how we got to that number. But the actual cost, as we kind of discussed here tonight, equates that 17%, mostly because of revenue base. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to remember. I remember it being, was it higher and then we dropped it down to 4%? There was some
No,
discussion
so,
around that.
so the
I thought.
current fee we charge right now, I believe, is 2.45%, which we were trying to just land on a number which was basically representing the transaction fees that we were being charged.
Yeah.
So the extra bump up is trying to recoup some of the staff time and efforts that we had to put in to get to that 4% number. As time goes on, that number the charges from the merchant provider and all that kind of increase, so it's probably now closer to 3% anyway. So that is really about a 1% number that we're probably capturing for staff costs. But that was basically a number that we thought was a fair number
That's
to go
what
up
I
to.
remembered. I thought we had discussed dropping it down to 3%. And that's why I'm just confused.
It was basically said to council, look, give me the direction you want. 4% is our recommendation, but, I mean, you guys can put anything you want, but we just felt 4% was the right number to get a fair amount of cost recouped for this program.
Okay.
There weren't three people who said 3% was preferable?
That's what I remember.
No,
That's
we
why I
didn't.
was confused.
The three people, the majority said to keep the fees where they were, so we went forward with the fees as presented.
Michael, weren't there certain credit cards that have a higher fee?
Yeah, so it depends on the credit card being used and the program, the rewards program behind it. So while our gateway provider, our merchant service provider fees are stagnant, depending on the credit card used, those fees can vary greatly, depending on the program being used. But we basically accept all credit cards, so I couldn't tell you an exact rate that it's going to be. The 2.5 was based on an average.
Yeah.
But yes, it varies greatly depending on the card being used.
And the direction from council was 5-0, motion by Vienna, seconded by Weber for the actual study and the setting of the public hearing. There was no action taken to direct us to reduce any of the fees.
That was approval of the fee study, though, Chris. That was direction to set the public hearing with everything that we're seeing today.
Review and consideration of the user fee study prepared by Wildan Financial and setting a date for a public hearing to solicit public input and approve a fee resolution based on the user fee study. Note that you weren't approving the fees. You were approving the study and sending that to the public hearing. And the changes could be made at this meeting if council so chooses on that percentage. But my understanding when we looked at the analysis for the initial percentage, because we didn't have that when I first arrived for credit cards, which is why you had your hoteliers coming in and paying by credit card, hundreds of thousands of dollars for their TOT so they can, for whatever purposes they would be paying, convenience. We analyzed it and the fees ranged all over the place to what the fees the credit card companies would give based on whatever that credit card was. So we landed on that fee right there. There is still processing and accountability that needs to occur. As more transactions occur, because we're encouraging credit cards and we're moving forward with the Excella online implementation, which would mean a lot of our development fees have the opportunity to go online, then the total amount of staff time per transaction drops, and then the cost drops overall, so we could always revisit that.
One thing that I just wanted to ask, whenever you have fees and you put a fine on something, if you don't have anyone enforcing it, it's worthless, okay? And my question would be, who or what agency or what section of our city is going to enforce the bicycle parked on a sidewalk? We can't even enforce having the skateboarders out here in City Hall with people zigzagging around them trying to figure it out. We haven't figured out how to enforce it. I know occasionally we'll have a staff member go out and mention it. You're not supposed to be here. 10 seconds later, they're back in the same place. So now if you're gonna worry about bikes on sidewalks, who's going to enforce that at this point? I know, being honest with you, and you know it as well as I do, you'd be hard pressed to get a sheriff's car to stop, to tell somebody to get off of the sidewalk. We got people going all over the deal, not just parked in front of roadies or somewhere. And, John brings up a good point when you talk about we're encouraging, bicyclists and bicyclers, to come here, to sit in our restaurants and eat. And quite honestly, maybe we don't have enough bike racks. And so if we're going to start fining them, those kind of dollars, then maybe we need, as a city, need to invest more money in bike racks.
And I can speak directly to this one. This is in specific reference to a California Vehicle Code to not obstruct walkways. And so if a bike is parked off to the side or it's out of the way, then that's not in violation of this vehicle code. This is specifically for that purpose, and it's based off of the California Vehicle Code. It's not establishing a new fee for you. It is just simply updating that penalty so that it can be enforced when out in the field if a substantial enough occasion warrants it.
And so we have enforcement personnel that are authorized to enforce the code, from code enforcement and parking enforcement, as well as the sheriff's office. But I can tell you, if the approach we were going to take with some of these codes were black and white, no, we're going to cite everybody. You block a sidewalk, that's it, you're getting a citation. I'd be directing staff to change their operating process. That is not how we operate. I've already been in a situation in a different agency where here's a bike blocking the sidewalk. It was simple. I picked it up, moved it 3 feet, and we're done. And so I don't see this as a, $48 will now impair our policy goal of trying to encourage bicyclists to be in our downtown, to move. That's not by any means the intent. But you have to have a fee that's large enough to penalize somebody who decides to do, nope, I'm leaving my bike right here, and that's perfectly fine. And, okay, well, I have no choice. Here's your citation.
I think that in itself is just going to create a bigger problem.
So,
So the next thing I would just want to know is that the $5 parking fee, okay, does that include $5 for, four-wheel vehicles? Or does that include recreation vehicles, 30-foot motorhomes, or what's our judge on that? Because I don't think that $5 is unreasonable personally for parking. I don't have a problem with that, but how are we breaking that down?
So yeah, that would include both, so auto and RVs.
Right. And our parking enforcement people already know that, so.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, just was a question. So let's take a restaurant downtown, any restaurant, and they want to put a, what are those signs called? A-frame, little A-frame thing that says, because in our downtown, our trees now are starting, anybody might not believe it, but our trees are starting to obstruct the frontage of our business. Nobody would ever believe that, because when we took the other trees down, we planted these trees, but now when you start looking downtown, you can't see the front of Prezzetto's, and you can't see the front of Sweet Savory, and you can see them pretty good on the north side of the street, but on the south side of the street, businesses are obstructed. So now we're talking, I'm sorry, I don't remember, $400 or $800 for a sign or things like that. Seems a little hard for a restaurant to put an A-frame sign up. Just wondering.
So would the city council, since it sounds like there is a list of under 10 fees that there's concerns about, perhaps we move those fees to a separate discussion, we vote on them individually at a future meeting and talk about them? Because it does sound like there's some hesitation, and given that the vast majority of fees are non-controversial, maybe we put those in place first. The only fee that I have a concern with is perhaps the credit card fee, just because 4% is above market for a lot of processing fees. I can't really remember very many fees that are at 4%. But that is something that I might recommend to my colleagues so we can move forward with the rest and not hold things up.
But how difficult of staff is it to just go ahead and approve the fee schedule and to then eventually bring this back, any particular fees to talk about? Because I don't want to, I'm in favor of, going ahead and approving the fee schedule as written.
Well,
But the reality is there are some concerns, and it sounds like there's more concerns because John will have 5 or 6, you'll have 1 or 2.
I have 1.
Okay? At some point, maybe Ryan may come up with something else. The next thing
I have a list if we're going to do it.
He'll want to plant a tree and now, or remove a tree, and it'll be
I'm getting rid of all
$400
those
to remove
fees.
that tree. So, I mean,
Mr. Mayor, if I may, the only concern I have with revisiting them is if you...
what now?
The only concern I have with revisiting them after you've approved everything is if you have a situation where, let's just say, we lower the fees, let's just say for credit cards, what do you do with the people who were paying more at that time? I think it'll be more complicated to figure out from a fairness standpoint, refunds and all that, then it might be just to hold those for now, talk about them, let the 99% the other fees move forward, and then talk about your concerns with the sign fee and parking and the rest.
Can I address that concern?
Yeah, please.
The fees in place or the fees charged that are approved are not refunding unless the council takes an action to reduce the fee and say we want to issue refunds, which would be very challenging.
Right, that's the point I'm making.
And so to your question, it's not hard at all to approve this and then have a discussion on any of the fees in a study session format. So the council, as they desired when they discuss these kind of policy items, want to be talking around a round table, the issues, and we have the ability to analyze what that actually means and the implications it has. So absolutely, if you want to identify fees that you want to have a study session, we could easily schedule that.
Okay, you're talking about identify them now.
No, at any time. Right now, we have to publicly notice for the public hearing. We have to notice utilities of the potential for fee changes in advance, which is something that we did already preparing for this meeting. And so if we're going to change any fee in the future, we would have to then do all of that if it's going to implicate those fees, those development fees. If there's 5 or 6 fees that the ones that are raised right now, we very easily, if the council decides to say, we like these 5, 6 fees plus a convenience fee to come back, you approve this, we'd like these to come back in a study session within 30, 60 days. And if there is then a change with that, then we do the same process we just did, the public hearing, we reduce the fees or change them, and then implement just those modifications for those set fees.
Yeah, I guess the challenge.
Thanks,
The
maker of the motion.
Yeah, the challenge I have with all of this is we had a study session. We went through all this. None of this is news to us tonight, and I think this is not an easy vote. I get it. None of us want to do it. But I also think we also have the discussion about the fiscal solvency of the city and what we're doing with revenues. And we talk about that so much. I think we owe it to the city and the citizens tonight to do this because ultimately, yes, we can cherry pick the fees. And, I'm happy to get in with the best of them and put my fees up there that I think are unfortunate for every little interest, every little interest. We all could pick a fee. But the reality of it is staff, and which is why I'm not choosing to even talk about the fees I'm interested in, is not because I don't know what they are. It's because I don't think it's fair to everyone for us to cherry pick the fees that should be changed. I think staff did a good job in studying this with a consultant, did the right thing on what they brought forward, and I think ultimately passing this without interference, I think is probably the best way for us to do this in a way that is equitable to the true interest of the city and not necessarily the politics of what we have to do. And later on, if we decide, we want to do a more comprehensive study again, and perhaps there's an opportunity to change some of these fees based off of either poor performance or, whatever the reasons are, then let's do it and do it comprehensively. But I just don't support us, cherry picking each one of these and doing that. It's just, we've put a lot of time and effort and energy and staff. I think they've given us a fair and reasonable proposal. I, of all people, don't like this topic, but I think they've done well, and I think we should support it. And I would ask that we call the question.
So if I may, the study session was where we first examined the fees, the forum in which we talk about them.
I'm sorry, excuse me, procedurally, point of order. I did ask to call the question, Mayor. I don't know if I have support to do that.
Do we have a second?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we had a second.
Okay. Any further discussion?
If you're calling the question, I don't think you can have discussion.
Yeah.
But I would like to make a comment after the vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
So my comment is that under council member comments, at some point, any council member can.
I don't
Great.
know what the vote
All
was.
right, motion is 4-1.
With Councilmember Nakano voting no.
Voting against.
4-1 to call the question, so the council has to act on the motion that was on the table.
Oh, that was okay, I'm sorry.
There's no comment.
That wasn't the,
Wait.
So if you
Right,
call-
so now he needs to call the
you've
vote
confused
for the
everybody
motion,
now.
Correct.
right? Yeah, so now you got to call the vote for the motion. Yeah, so now you got to call the vote for the motion.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's your motion.
Yeah, so it
Second
sounds like
You
a
second it.
5-0.
So right now, we're at 5-0. Okay.
Okay, cool.
We're done.
Motion-
5-0.
Motion carries 5-0.
I can hold my comment either to the council member
Why don't you
comment.
make your comment now, because I'm going to make a comment too.
Yeah, it's just that Eric and Emmett and anybody else who wants to do it, we can always bring back these, one line item if we want to. And honestly, besides the time involved in the noticing of the public hearing, which is the big pain, it is not hard at all to discuss 1, 2, 3, or 5 fee changes we could agendize it, if somebody asked at the end of the meeting, for next meeting and then bring it back. I'm not saying that I'm going to do that, but that's a way of doing, Eric, what you were talking about, if we want to
Yeah,
discuss the credit card fee, for example.
Again, the logistical concerns I had with that, if, let's just say we lower it, were a concern. And so if you do in fact want to lower it, it gets very complicated to figure out, well, what do you do with the people that paid that higher fee? The motion carried. I think at this point we have a decision, and it is what it is, so we can move forward with the next order of business.
Okay.
I'm done.
And my comment is, I'd be honest with you, 3 out of John's 6, I have some concerns with, and I would be willing to discuss at some point. Okay. So we have a fee schedule. We don't know when the last one was, but we know when the current one was. Okay? So thank you very much. Thanks very much for the staff, but more importantly, because the guy who had the hardest pull there was the consultant and his crew. Thank you very much for being patient with us. And, and we talked about, just being honest with you, we talked about having a study session. I got to be honest, we were there for an hour and a half, 2-3 hours, okay? We had 2,000 plus fees, and I'll tell you right now, something got past somebody because nobody was able to speak to every fee. So now I think where we're at now is some people are paying a little more attention to a specific fee, and we'll see if it, gets some legs and somebody's concerned. Okay, I think we're talking 2 different animals here. Okay, we're talking the kid on his tricycle, and we're talking a kid, very grown adults riding bicycles, speeding all over the place. So I think, I got to tell you, I'm not sure that I am concerned so much about the guy with the speedy racer as I am the guy on the kid on the tricycle who's trying to get a sandwich. So we'll come back to that.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. And thank you, staff, for your dedication to the project.
Thank you. Staff, great job. Thank you. I know it was very difficult, and you brought some things forward that probably were very hard to say and think about. All right, we'll move on to oral communications. Members of the audience, speakers are limited to 3 minutes, or maybe as be determined by the chair. Anyone wishing to speak to the council at this time? Seeing none, we'll move on to city reports. City manager.
Several of us attended the League of California Cities last week, and I have to say, quite a number of other elected officials, city managers, and other staff, ranging from analysts to assistant city managers. A lot of great sessions, as usual. A lot of great vendors to be able to learn a number of different practices. And I would say, as we attend these conferences, where council members can attend, there's definitely a substantial benefit in terms of what we can learn, especially from the other cities that are out there. And so I thank the 2 council members that were in attendance during the course of that event. Also this week, we had the death of a firefighter that lived in San Dimas. That firefighter was not a City of San Dimas firefighter, it was a CAL FIRE individual, but nevertheless, it brings to the forefront the threat and risk that firefighters and police officers and other public safety officials take every day that are out there. That it isn't necessarily fighting the fire itself that becomes the risk to worry about, is everything that can come from it, as well as this rare disease that that individual died. And so with that, we should honor the folks that put their lives on the line, and we thank for the service they do in our city of San Dimas, as well as those who work elsewhere but that live in our city. With that, Mr. Mayor, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. City Attorney?
I have no reports tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Members of the council, council members' reports on meetings attended at the expense of the local agency.
Mr. Mayor, I attended the League of California Cities Conference in Sacramento at the expense of the city. I'll talk more about it in my comments.
I did the same, and I will do the same as well.
Okay. Council requests for future items, comments, and updates. Councilman Nakano.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have no comments tonight.
Eric?
Just to touch on that last meeting that Councilmember Vienna, City Manager Chris Constantine, and I went to. A couple of sessions of note that we attended. There was a transparency in law enforcement, specifically as it related to implementing new technological advances, and there are quite a few moving forward. I think they focused a lot on license plate reader systems, but I think we were kind of on the forefront of that, and we've already experienced some of those growing pains, but looking into the future, drone programs, and there are quite a few different things related to technology, using hardware that already exists, like body cams, that will be, including facial recognition and things of the like, that will be an issue in the coming future. It was nice to hear about that. And then the other was the ethics of the use of AI in government, which was very interesting. It was a quick session. I think we were in and out of there in 20 minutes or something like that, but very interesting to think about, and something that I never thought that I would be entertaining while I was on council. So that was kind of neat. And I wanted to apologize because I had a streak going on of attending all of the 5Ks that we've put on up until now. And unfortunately, I'm going to be out of town for the next one. So I think I left Councilmember Nakano high and dry, and he's going to be the only one on the council running, as far as I know.
No, unfortunately, I'm not going to be around.
So I apologize for missing that, but I'll be there in thought. So.
And I think I understood that the 5K starts at 7?
I think registration's at 6:30, 7:30 is when the registration and check-in at 6:30, and then the 5K starts at 7:30 with the 1 mile fun run at 9 and the toddler trot at 9:30.
Thank you. John?
Want me to just keep going? Okay, so,
Yeah, just keep
so
going.
that was on my list. That's the, and, it is called, even though it's, we're celebrating Halloween earlier and earlier, so this is still the Run and Scared event. Costumes are definitely welcome, and so they're optional, so you don't have to have a costume, but that is happening. The location is right here in the Civic Center Plaza. They'll start probably out here on Iglesia. The 1 mile, I think, I'm not sure where it starts, in front of City Hall. But they have, they have professional timers and all that kind of good stuff. So come out, and it's such a great event. The age groups are 5 years, and there's medals for like each age range, men and women. So a good chance of getting a medal if you come out and participate. And you don't have to run, you can walk. All right, other than that, you might recall that last meeting I said I would spend some of my time with the comments here to bring up things that I feel might be of interest and just deserve the public's attention or the city council's attention. A lot of these are not for any action. I have one tonight that's for a future agenda. So I have three things. One thing I'd like to talk about is green space and open space in the downtown corridor. You know, the state has told San Dimas that we have to provide zoning for 1,248 new housing units. Last year, at the end of last year, we adopted a housing element that puts most of these units along the Bonita corridor. And to implement that housing element, part of it anyway, is the downtown specific plan. And our planning staff has suggested zoning along the Bonita corridor that would allow up to 2,300 new units. Now, we've got a presentation and discussion with staff in late October, and that number may change. But whatever the number is, there will be a lot of new residents occupying all those new apartments. And all I'll say for now is that it is important to provide open space for our residents. And that could be in the form of tiny parks, little plazas, open-air plazas, outdoor dining, rooftop gardens, et cetera. But that's just all I want to say about that. It is important to provide green space where so many new residents would have access to, as well as anybody who visits downtown. Speaking about green space, I wanted to mention something I haven't brought up for a while, and that is the Bill and Ted statue. So what is the Bill and Ted statue, you ask? One spot of green space that we already have in downtown is that green space on the corner of Bonita and San Dimas Avenue next to Starbucks. That's city-owned property. And as you know, for a while, every now and then, I'll talk about how I think that San Dimas should have a public art piece inspired by the movie Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, which takes place in the movie right here in San Dimas. And I feel a good place for this to go, and this was suggested by a longtime resident a couple years ago, would be in this green space on the corner of Bonita and San Dimas Avenue. The art piece could be in the form of a phone booth, which of course is central to the plot of that movie. It could be a statue of Bill and Ted in their iconic pose, like that, or both. But, you know, as always, getting the money to build it is an issue. But I just think of how cool it would be to have this piece of art right in the center of town. And so I could talk about other cities that have public art based on movies or music, but I won't go into that now. I just wanted to mention Bill and Ted as a possible thing to keep in our minds for that corner. And speaking about art, this is the last item, I've brought up the idea of an Arts and Culture Commission. I have some information, and I've had it for whenever we last discussed it. You know, maybe might be a page or 2 pages. And what I'd like to do is be able to present that at a city council meeting so that, because it would be a violation of the Brown Act for me to go and say, okay, here's my information about this. And we haven't really had a chance to talk about that. So all I'm asking is that we get this on the agenda for the next meeting. I'll supply the information to staff. I've talked to Chris about this. And so staff's time involved would be just to make an agenda item out of it. And maybe I'd have a brief explanation of what I'm presenting. And we could go from there. It's mainly to get the information out, not necessarily to start, you know, deciding what we want to do, unless the majority of the council wanted to do that. But it's mainly just, I feel I haven't been able to just present to the council and the public that information. So I'm just taking that as an opportunity.
Would you be opposed to a study session?
I'd like to, so at our next meeting, I'd rather just have it on the agenda, and if we want to, however we want to do it, boy, oh boy, if you want to have a study session on it, I'd jump at that. But
I'm good with a study session.
But let's do I wanted to present it so the whole public has it here, because we don't have AV in the side room, and so I want to, you know, put the points up on the screen. Everybody has a copy, and do it in a regular meeting, and it should not be a long from my point of view, it should not be a long discussion at the next meeting.
I would support your proposal.
Thanks, Eric. That is all I have for tonight. Thanks.
Ryan?
Thank you, Mayor. One is, as Councilmember Weber discussed and City Manager Chris Constantine did, we attended the League of California Cities Conference from Wednesday to Friday. And it's always interesting. It's a good opportunity for your council members and your staff to go up and meet with a lot of different folks, get to talk to different city attorneys, for example, get some perspective on things and get some perspective from other communities and things that they're struggling with. One thing, for example, that probably was a very interesting and challenging thing I did not know was occurring, and I think I shared it with a few people, is in the city of Coalinga, they have a state mental health hospital and they have a prison, and their local measures have been defeated multiple times because the inmates and the committees to the hospitals vote in those elections, and in fact have been voting against the local measures. In fact, a couple years ago, someone who's committed to the state hospital, the mental health hospital, in fact, was looking at running for city council, and it was a legitimate issue that, in fact, was really discussed, and you can find a lot of information about this in the news. This council member was telling, I said, well, what kind of challenges are you guys facing? Well, Eric and I were waiting for an Uber, and this guy goes, oh, you would not believe the challenges that these hospitals and the prison has created for our community in trying to get local tax measures passed to advance programs. And I just kind of chuckled, and I said, oh my gosh, that's pretty wild. I never would have actually thought that would be something a community would view as a challenge or impediment. But I share that with everyone to say that when you look at the challenges that all of our different communities have throughout the state, there's so many things that are so different, but there's so many things that are the same. And a lot of it has to do, as you've heard the council and the staff and others talk about, is, the slew of housing laws and how we build in these times, how we look at affordability and what innovative ways can we work to be able to meet affordability requirements, but not necessarily changing the tenor or the character of a community, but still being able to reach those goals to help people. And so there was a lot of interesting sessions, as Councilmember Weber talked about, the session on law enforcement and accountability. That was fascinating, but I think we're both happy to report that, at least where we're being serviced here, the agency, the Sheriff's Department, is on par and in fact ahead of the curve as it relates to a lot of the things that were talked about by a lot of these smaller agencies. But I also should tell you that the expo that you go to after this is really interesting. We had the opportunity to meet a concrete vendor who stopped us because you walk around with your name tag saying what city you're from and stuff. And this guy wanted to thank us for engaging him as one of the vendors in the city in a contract we awarded, and talked about how he's been going through surveying the community, grinding down, raising sidewalks, and surveying all of this stuff, and really kind of how systematically they're going through to do that. And, it was just kind of the craziest thing that, we were walking looking for ice cream, to be honest, and this guy goes, hey, stop, hey, thank you guys so much, your community, we really enjoy being out there and working with the city. And I think that's the other thing is, hearing how staff engages with the vendors, how they really have gotten to know our community, know our city, know the expectations, is really refreshing. And so I thank staff for that. The other thing that you benefit from going to these events is socialization. And I think on, Wednesday night, we had the opportunity to meet with Councilmember Lau, Wendy Lau from Laverne, and spend some time with her, and a planning commissioner from Ontario, and a council member from Claremont. And so we were all out kind of representing the East San Gabriel Valley while we got a late night snack, and we're talking about just some of the things going on in the region. So thank you, I think, Chris, and Deborah for getting all of that together for us, getting us up there. It always is fun. The hotel was a little far, but we can talk about that later, but it all worked out. But I will tell you this, when you look at our homelessness situation here, and it's always interesting traveling, is that you really don't realize, yes, we have our challenges, but how blessed we are in this community here, and how much we really do the things to support the people here as best we can. And I think that is something that has been very interesting. I will also say I traveled to Scottsdale and Tempe and was at all these airports over the last few days. And I sat on a bench, and it made me think about John, and because I almost fell off of it. It was a homeless-proofed bench, and it was very curved. And I was like, this is a damn good bench, you know? No one's going to sleep on this bench. And anyways, I took a picture, so I'll send it to you later. But it's like a space saucer. It was the weirdest thing I'd ever seen. But anyways, sorry, I digress. The other thing is I wanted to share with everybody is, the holidays, Halloween's coming up, a lot of the events. So it is important, I think people should look at the fire department and the sheriff's department's websites as it relates to public safety. Specifically, kids are going to be ingesting, large amounts of candy and other things that they're probably going to get from all kinds of places. And choking is a real hazard, during this time, especially when kids are getting into things. So please be mindful of that. Look at the resources that are available to make sure we're doing the right thing to take care of our young people. And I think lastly, I look forward, John is correct. I went on a couple weeks ago, I was in Napa with my wife, and we went on the wine train, and we drove through a corridor of the train that had, well, they called it public art, and some of it did look like public art. But I will tell you, when I went back to the airport in Oakland, I'm not confident it was public art that was sprayed all over these buildings as we were driving back to the airport, but I could see how one might argue that too. And I will say that, learning about how cities are dealing with things is really interesting, especially when cities like Oakland and San Francisco are struggling with smash and grab burglaries from vehicles. I mean, to the point where Avis told us not even to stop in Oakland or San Francisco for fuel. They just said, drive straight out of the city, go to Napa, don't stop. And they had a rather aggressive campaign that was everywhere, plastered everywhere, telling people to do the things that we try to tell people to do. Hide your belongings, don't have things in plain view, and so forth. And I just, you can't help but think how blessed we are here, yes, we have our challenges, but we don't have those challenges. So I thank staff, I thank the sheriff's department, all the deputies, and especially our firefighters, and our teachers, because realistically, when you go and you start talking to these people, it's all of us that really set the tone for the community and for what we allow and for what we don't accept. And I think everybody here does a really good job on being vigilant, being accommodating, being inclusive, but really just making this a really great place. So thank you. I hope everybody has a great weekend. Unfortunately, I intended to smoke both Nakano and Weber at the run this weekend, but I will be out of town, unfortunately, with my wife, some prior plans. But I will see you guys at the next one. And I knew the mayor was going to run, but I know he's busy too. So thank you. And by the way, I do think we should create, I know Jay probably left, but we should create a city council category in the next run. That's just my thoughts.
I guess you'll have fun. But
I'll at least get third.
I am certainly not opposed to, because Ryan just kind of like threw down a gauntlet towards Eric and the two Erics, but I am not opposed at all to, we all go outside at one point or another when it's still daylight, and they'll lay out the course for that 1 mile, and I will still put my money on either one of the two Erics.
Ye of little faith, Mayor.
Well, you know what? I saw you run the last 2 years, so I don't have a real problem with that.
Fair enough.
Using the term "run" very loosely as well.
Yeah. I do want to thank the council for handling 2 weeks ago a meeting. I was unfortunately under the weather, and I watched it on television. I thought you guys did a great job, and thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. There's a couple of things I just wanted to mention. We always talk about new restaurants. We don't get many, even though we don't seem to, we sometimes forget it. But we got this Nick the Greek coming to town. We had Subway move. But a couple weeks back, I was told about this new hamburger place that was coming to town. I had no clue where it was. I drove all over town looking for this new hamburger place. Couldn't find it at all. So what I did is I drove over to West Covina to a place called Bun Street, B-U-N Street. Then there was a taco street, and then there was a ice cream street. There were 3 restaurants right in a row. So I go in and I order a hamburger, which was, I thought, pretty good. And some onion rings, and I ate it, and some talked with the waitress there, and found out that Bun Street is now in San Dimas, and it's at the old La Pupusas, which is right here on San Dimas Avenue, just north of Arrow Highway, right next door to the Berry Brothers gas station, just north of that. There's that patio out there. You see the awning they have out there. Had lunch there a couple of times. The city manager and I went a couple days ago. I suggest that you try it. I think the people there are looking forward to, a very successful business there, and it was pretty good. And if you've been driving by there, they actually have people sitting out on the patio having lunch, and it looks like it's going to be a nice place. And welcome addition to San Dimas. With that all being said, I don't often look for somebody to give me a second on agendizing an item, but I would look to fellow councilmen to support me, and I want to request us to agendize extending the timeline for temporary emergency outdoor dining structures to be removed by an additional 180 days. I want to give these people an opportunity to look to what they want to do, what they possibly can do after talking to staff and everything. And I think we gave them 90 days. I don't think that's long enough. I'd like to give them an additional 180 days, which would end up in the end of June 30th. So if anybody else is interested in that, I'd appreciate.
Mr. Mayor, I'll support you in that.
Yeah, I support that as well.
Thank you.
In fact, do we have to bring that?
Yes, this is to bring back a discussion about whether the council would want to do that.
Okay. Next meeting, I imagine?
Yeah, it can be an action item.
I'll work with staff on that. We can recycle the old staff report and then add an additional 80 days for action at the next meeting.
Super, thank you.
I wonder, just as a matter of expediency, is that something that could be on the consent calendar, and if anyone's opposed, they'll just pull it off?
Sure, we can agendize that as such.
Cool.
Thank you. Thank you. And just one additional item. As everybody that's involved in a commission knows, we've had, with the exception of our golf committee, I think all 5 of our commissions have had the opportunity to meet, got sworn in, and they actually handled their first meetings, and which most of it was discussion of their mission. And I thought that I attended them all, and most of the council attended them. And I think that even though there was lots of discussion and lots of concerns about the process worked. The commissions understand that they work for all 5 councilmen. There's no District 1 or District 2 or District 3 or District 4. These commissions all were appointed by the entire city council, and they all recognize that and they understand it. So nobody owns any allegiance to anyone. They only to the allegiance of the city of San Dimas. And I want to thank them for accepting this goal. There was lots of enthusiasm. Every commission had a great amount of enthusiasm, and I want to just say thank you, and thank you, the community, for enduring us through this process. But I think it's a move that we'll be excited to see how it works, and the commissions are going to be functional. And thank you very much. With that all being said, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Adjourn for 2 weeks.